Okay. And I guess this thing is really big. I'm not quite sure. I guess I could stand on a chair and talk, or I'll probably just stand to one side or the other most days. Okay. I may try the other side next time until I find something that works. Just go back and forth. So this is CSC 494 data visualization. This will be the third time that we've taught this class at ASU. So we've had it 2 times before. It's weird why that thing's up there. Get that out the way. There we go. So we've taught this class 2 times before. So hopefully, third time's a charm. It'll be even better than the previous iteration. Now, so far, students have really liked this class, and I hope that y'all like it too. I think it's a pretty fun class. Data visualization is kind of my research area, data visualization, analysis, things related to that, human-computer interaction. So we're going to talk about those sorts of topics in this class. How do I visualize data computationally? Today's class, we're just going to do a brief lecture, just kind of an introduction to visualization. What is it? Why is it important? And then talk about some class logistics. Okay. So what is visualization and why is it important? So let's look at the why first. So why would we want to visualize data? So these are some example types of tasks that you might want to, the visualization could reasonably support. Just, it's not all of them, it's just, some that I've thought of. And I'm sure you can think of others too. So analyze data, right? If I have some data, I don't really understand it, I can visualize the data and then I can analyze it and maybe reason about it. Maybe I have a question about the data. I want to answer the question by visualizing the data, right? Depending on how I visualize it, I can answer my question. Communicating ideas to others. And if you look in a newspaper, right, there's visualizations in newspapers. If you look at like a map of the weather for today, right, they visualize the distribution of temperatures across Arizona or across the US, right? They're communicating some idea or knowledge to you. And so there's other things: confirm a hypothesis, present findings, understand data maybe in some specific context, expand memory. Okay, that's kind of interesting. Right, I can visualize something and expand my mind. Right, sounds pretty a little trippy almost. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. What does it mean to expand my memory by visualizing data? Make decisions, reveal patterns, understand trends, find outliers, support computational analysis, and then finally, data is beautiful. This is kind of a more recent idea that data by itself has maybe some inherent or intrinsic beauty. And when we visualize that data, it's almost like art. The data itself has some artistic merit. Okay, so these are just some examples of why might I want to visualize data. Okay, so here's a visualization. Your first visualization for the class. So this comes from a New York Times story. Which countries medal the most at the Olympics? Okay, so this specific type of visualization is called a stream graph. You can kind of see the name stream. It almost looks like rivers, right, or flows that are happening. So what is some of the information that's being shown here? So raise your hand if you want to make a comment. What is this chart showing? Any thoughts? Gonna take a drink of coffee while I wait. I am gonna wait until someone raises their hand. Yeah. Okay, but you could see that just by reading the title. That is true. And that is correct, right? It shows the number of metals won for each year. And so the thickness of the stream as we go across years, right, as we go left to right, shows the number of metals that were won by that country. So what are some other insights that you can interpret or derive from this visualization?
Relativity between the countries.
Okay, relativity between the countries, or comparison. I can compare two countries, their metal counts, either say for like the same year, right? So 1980, like which country had the most? Probably East Germany, right? Probably East Germany. I think that's bigger than Soviet Union. Yeah, so I can compare two countries. Good. Yeah.
There's no like Y scale.
Mm-hmm.
You can't really tell any like actual numbers. It's more just a proportion.
Okay, yeah, that's a really good point. There's no Y scale here, right? If you think about something like, say, a line chart or a bar chart, normally we have a vertical scale with tick marks that indicate, here's the value at this height. This type of chart doesn't have that. Instead, you have to look at, what's the thickness of the band. So it's a bit less precise of a measurement. Perceptually, just how our eyes can actually, interpret the data, that's a little less accurate than something like a line chart. So that's actually a really good point, because we talk about that sort of design trade-off throughout the class. Okay? Any other things you notice about this chart?
It shows how countries change, like Germany, East and West Germany.
Yeah, it shows how countries change. So East Germany just disappears, right? Because it was no longer a country. Same with West Germany. The U.S. boycotted the 1980 Olympics, so that's why their ban goes to 0. Jamaica, right, in recent years, they've really come on as a country. Now, this chart doesn't tell us why, right? It's probably because of track and field events, right? They're really good at those. But we can see the trend, right? The pattern of the countries kind of over time. Yeah, good. There's one other thing that I think is kind of interesting about this chart. And it's the colors. Was that what you were going to say?
Yeah, also the fact that not every single stream has a country affiliated with it.
Okay, yeah, correct. Yeah, so not every stream is labeled. So, they kind of labeled maybe some of the more prominent countries. But that's a design choice, right? Not everything is annotated. If I annotated every single line, it'd get really cluttered really fast. So they just highlighted some of the more kind of the bigger countries, right? The ones that have a bigger amount of metals. And so then color too. You can see that color, U.S. and Jamaica, they're both a shade of blue. So even though there's not a color key, that labels these are North American countries, you can still kind of make that association if you have more of the context, right? I know that Jamaica and the U.S. are, they're North American countries, and so they're both that color. Right? East-West Germany, they were special European countries, right? And then kind of the other countries, they just kind of flew into this gray, whitish bucket. So an important thing to think about with visualization, and one of the things that I think is really interesting about this class, it's not just a programming class. Okay, we are going to do a lot of coding, a lot of web-based programming, but you also have to have kind of a design mindset, a creative thinking, or even an artistic mindset. Right? I could plot this data using like a line chart or like a bar chart or something, but something like this is much more attractive, right? It provides the information to you in a way that kind of, that just blink? Okay, what does this mean? It gives you the information, right, in a way that almost tells a story, right? The way it presents these trends over time. The designer of this chart wants to emphasize, here's the countries, the patterns of some of the major countries based on their medal count at the Olympics. Okay, so it's not just showing the data, not just plotting the data, but there's a reason, right? Like, what insights do they want to communicate? And they style their chart to promote those. Okay. Here's another chart. This one's a little bit simpler. Pulled this one from Reddit. So, right, so they have what is going on? Let's hang on.
There goes.
Oh man, okay. Well, darn. Okay. Guess we can play with it a little bit. Oh, there we go. Okay. Okay. Alright, where was I? Alright, so this is there's a pretty cool subreddit called Data is Beautiful, and it's just people posting, visualizations of data. So this is one I took from there. And it's a chart of Google Trends. So you can, Google has a pretty cool tool where I can see what are search terms, the frequency of search terms over time. And so these are the trends around August 21st, 2017, for the term solar eclipse, that's in blue, and the term my eyes hurt, which is in orange. Right, and so they plotted this using Excel or something really simple. So what is the insight that you kind of take out of this chart? Any thoughts? Yeah.
Pretty detailed. Every 20 minutes or so, I think the increments, so you can see that, right after the eclipse is over, then everyone went back to the computer and looked up by the either because it probably looked up the phone.
Yeah, so it's actually pretty granular, right? It's pretty fine grained, like 20-minute increments or 15-minute increments. Right, you can kind of see there's this relationship between the solar eclipse, right? It happened at around like 2 o'clock, right, is what that position is. Right after the solar eclipse, there was this big jump in search trends. There was a big jump in searches for my eyes hurt. So, right, so, you're not supposed to look at the sun when, you're supposed to look through those there's those little contraptions you build, where you can look at where it's not going to hurt your eyes. So this is a very simple visualization that kind of indicates basically people are dumb. They did something they shouldn't have. And there's this relationship between the solar eclipse and people looking at the sun. Okay, so visualization. If you go to the dictionary and look at the definition, right, the first definition says the act or instance of visualizing. Well, for us, that's not very helpful. Right, visualization is the act of visualizing. But the second definition is a little better. Well, no, it's not actually. Sorry, my next slide actually has a better definition. Even the second definition here is pretty bad. A technique involving focusing on positive mental images in order to achieve a particular goal. Right, so I did this a lot when I was a student and there was like a midterm coming up. Right, I'd start practicing my visualization at that point. But that's not what we're going to do in this class. The definition we're going to use in this class is right here. Computer-based visualization systems provide visual representations of data sets designed to help people carry out tasks more effectively. All right, so that's a bit of there's a lot of words in that. So let's go through and look at kind of some of the components of this definition. What do we mean by this? Computer-based visualization systems provide visual representations of data sets designed to help people carry out tasks more effectively. All right, let's look at these two words first. Data sets and people. So in general, visualization as a technique is suitable when we need to augment or help or assist our human capabilities as opposed to just replacing them with some computer method or computer algorithm or some machine learning model. Okay? So we want to use visualization when we need to help people do something, not help the computer do something. Okay, so if we don't have some automatic solution, right? I don't have an algorithm that solves my data problem. Maybe by visualizing the data, the human can use their own reasoning to understand the data. I might not know what questions to ask in advance. Okay, so if I have a machine learning model, right, I train my data on some model. And when I give it, an input vector or a feature set, right, the model will spit out some answer, some classification or regression, depending on how I've trained the model. If I don't know what question to ask, though, I don't know how to train the model. So by visualizing the data, I can actually generate questions. What do I want to learn about the data? I might not know till I can actually see it. Next, exploratory analysis. So again, if it's the first time I'm seeing this data, right, I can put the human, what we call in the loop, with the computer in the visualization. Right? We visualize the data, the human does some analysis, some reasoning. Maybe I update the visualization. I select more data. I choose a different way to represent it. Then it goes back to the human, and they can reason more about it. Right? I can explore the data. Another thing, present data to others. Right? Like the examples we just looked at. They looked at that data, and they were presenting it to you. And then finally, a stepping stone to automation. So we see this sometimes. Again, maybe I want to train some, machine learning model or write a program to do some function. Right? Say I want to write some software that does stock trading. Okay, before I write my code, I can visualize the stock data to kind of understand what's my space, what am I working with. As I develop the software, I might visualize, its performance, the actions that it's making, to debug it, to understand, is it actually working, correctly? Is it going to spend all my money, right, on bad trades? And then once my program's finished, right, the stock program might run on its own, right? It's making trades really fast, much faster than a human could. I can still use visualization to monitor and verify, is it still working correctly? Right, so when I have data and I need a person to provide oversight or reasoning, visualization is very suitable. Okay, next. Visual representations. So computer-based visualization systems provide visual representations. Okay, so this is an idea that's known as external representation. We're replacing cognition with perception. We're expanding our memory. I don't need to remember the information. I can just look at the visualization to solve my problem. Okay, so here's a visualization, a subway map, that illustrates this concept. If I want to go from point A to point B, I don't have to look at like an Excel table of all the stops and kind of figure out how to navigate. I can just look at the map and trace the path that'll get me from point A to point B. And then again, let's say next week I want to do that same trip. I don't have to remember that start and stop point. I can just go look at the map again and replace my cognition, my memory, just with perception. I can look at it again and say, oh right, these are the stops I need to do. Here's the station change I need to do. So it's a visual representation that provides external representation. Okay, visual, right? Visualization results in a visual representation. So what's the advantage of vision, right, as one of our 5 senses? So vision, or the human visual system, is what we call a high bandwidth channel to the brain. It takes in a lot of information. In this image here, the blue section kind of represents the amount of information that our visual system processes. And so if you can read the little icons here, they're using computer metaphors like a computer network, the bandwidth speed on a network. This is kind of an old figure, so they say it's about like a network itself, that much, that amount of bandwidth. Compared to our next highest bandwidth sense, which is touch, it's an order of magnitude more information. So we intake 10 times more visual information than we do tactile information. And so one of the cool things about vision is that we see everything all at once. Okay? So what do I mean by that? When you look at this, at this slide here, right? You don't have to focus on each individual letter or each individual word, right? You see the whole slide, and you can kind of process it all in parallel. So we can see everything simultaneously. When you're walking around, you don't have to actively focus on, right, individual things. You see the whole scene. Compared to our other senses, they're not as good at these sorts of actions. They're much lower bandwidth. Right? Sight is an order of magnitude larger than touch, which itself is an order of magnitude larger than hearing and smell, which is an order of magnitude larger than taste. Okay, so much higher bandwidth. It also has different semantics. When I taste something, I don't really taste everything simultaneously. You know, when you eat food, there's usually kind of one taste that kind of rises to the top. When you hear something, right, you can really hear one thing at a time. If multiple people are talking, it's difficult for you to like separate those and interpret them. Yeah, so sound is sequential, right? So the human visual system is kind of a different, it's just different compared to our other senses. Visualization takes advantage of that. Okay? One more kind of interesting thing about this slide. You guys see this little bitty white pixel right there? Can y'all see that? So that is the amount of information that your brain is actively aware of at any time from all of your senses put together. So all of this sensory information from all of your senses is happening. A lot of the time, most of it you're not even aware of. I think that's really interesting. Okay, so why represent data visually, right? So representations of data sets. So if I have a data set, why not just output some statistic about the data set to answer whatever question I have about it, right? Well, I can do that, right, if I want to know the average for, like, you know, if I have a roster of the class, and I want to know what's the average height, right, I could, you know, if it has your height on there, I could just take that and compute the average, and I have my answer, right? So I can compute that statistic. Sometimes when we do that, right, these statistical summaries, we lose information. The details might actually be important. So visualization can confirm maybe some aspect of the data, or we can find something that's unexpected about the data, right? I might know the average, but maybe it's skewed because one of you is like 7 feet tall. You know, there's like some weird skew in the data that's causing that. Another thing we can do is we can actually assess the validity of some statistical model. You know, maybe the model is providing the output, but we can actually visualize how does it get there. So let me show an example of this. So this is called Anscombe's quartet. It's a set of 4 data sets. So, right, so first 2 columns, data set 1. Next 2 columns, data set 2. Next 2 columns, data set 3. And the last 2 are data set 4. Okay, so each data set just has 2 attributes, an X value and a Y value. So it's pretty simple, 2-dimensional data set. The interesting thing, though, each of these 4 data sets have the same summary information, the same statistics. Right, so the same X average, the same Y average, same variance, the same correlation value. So if all you looked at was, you know, these stats, you might think these are very similar data sets, right? Because it's difficult to look at the raw data and kind of, you know, confirm, is it the same, you know, are they similar data sets or are they different? Let's visualize it. Let's see what it looks like if we visualize the data. Yeah, so, right, we visualize the data, and now it's obvious that there are 4 pretty different data sets. Right? Even though they have some of the same summary information, they're actually very different. By visualizing the data, we're able to see that very easily and intuitively. Yeah, if you want to look at a little bit more about this, the link on this slide has some newer examples of this phenomenon. It's pretty interesting. Okay, so visual representations of data sets designed to help people carry out tasks more effectively. Well, I have some tasks. right? I want to analyze the data, I want to answer a question, I want to present it. I visualize the data set, and it helps me carry out that task more effectively. So what do we mean by effectiveness? Well, there's some match, right? There's lots of ways we could represent data. Right? There's lots of visualization techniques out there. How do we match these potential visualizations to, some task and data set that I'm working with? Think about it like this. The set of all possible representations, every way I could represent data, right? It's huge. It could be this huge space. For the data and the task I'm working with, a lot of those representations probably don't make sense. They're going to be very ineffective or inefficient. So when we know how to reason about visualizations, right? If I understand the trade-offs and the ways to represent data, I have a better chance of choosing effective visualizations. Okay, so what do we mean by effective? Well, maybe it's novel, right? I can actually analyze the data in a way that I couldn't before. That's a lot of the research work that we do in our lab, developing novel ways to represent data or computational processes, which leads to new, better, or deeper analysis. Efficiency. Make my workflow faster. If I choose the correct visualization, I know the answer to my question very fast. And then finally, correct. I represent the data in a way that I can actually interpret what it shows. Okay, so how do I validate effectiveness? Lots of ways to do this. Like I could run a user study. Right? I could present the data two different ways. And this half of the class does the task with one way. This half does it another way. And the winner, that's the technique I'm going to pick. Okay, that makes sense. There's also guidelines that we've developed over the years for choosing ways to encode data, different ways to represent attributes. So I can use those guidelines to help design my visualizations. Right, so lots of ways you can do it. All right, so what are some of the limits of visualization? There's three main limits. The first one is computational. If it takes a long time to process my data or generate my visualization, then that's a limit. Right? So think of it like graphics, right? Computer graphics. If my graphics card is not strong enough to process the graphics that I'm showing, then it's hard to use the system. If it takes up too much memory, right, it's hard to use the system. The human itself can be a limit, right? Maybe this chart, right, maybe my lecture is too long, and your attention just cannot handle it, right? It's a limit of, right, how long you can pay attention to the lecture or to the visualization. Memory, right? Maybe you have to use memory to help interpret the data, right? There's limits to how much information we can store. Cognition and perception. Can I actually understand what the chart is showing? Can I perceive it correctly? And then finally, the display. How big is your display? If it's a laptop, right, I've got like a 4K monitor. So I've got a lot of pixels at my disposal to visualize data. But something like, right, a cell phone, I have much fewer, like the space is a lot smaller, right? Fewer pixels, it's a lot more constrained, right? The amount of information I can show on a visualization on my phone is much more limited compared to a laptop or a desktop computer. So kind of one aspect of this is what we call information density. How much space actually encodes information compared to unused space? We'll talk about that some during the semester too. All right, so why does visualization work? Well, humans have limited memory and cognition. There's a really interesting paper, an old paper, 1950s, called The Magical Number 7 plus or minus 2. Has anyone ever heard of this paper before? No? So 7 is the number of things, the number of items that you can store in your working memory at any one time. So the number of things you can kind of juggle just in your immediate memory is about 7 things, plus or minus 2. But I can visualize a lot more than 7 things, right? So I can replace cognition or memory with perception or external representation. Another reason that visualization works is we can overcome what we call change blindness. So let me play this video. See if I can.
Watch what happens as the unsuspecting pedestrian provides directions. The young man on the left is one of the experimenters. He has approached the white-haired man and asked for directions. Watch closely as 2 people carrying a door pass between them, and the first experimenter is replaced by someone else.
So, y'all see that? They switched people.
Like many of the people in this study, the pedestrian was entirely unaware that he was talking to a different person. Approximately 50% of the people approached in this study didn't notice when the person they were talking to was replaced by someone else.
Okay. I have no idea why those subtitles are there. That's Arabic, right? Okay. Yeah, so change blindness. Right, that previous slide, right, had that image, the amount of information that our visual system, right, it's a really high bandwidth channel. We're only aware of very small parts of it. So that's an illustration of change blindness. You also see this sometimes like let's say someone gets in a car wreck, right? You pull up you stop at the stop sign, you look left, you look right, you go, and a car hits you. You didn't even see him, right? That's an example of change blindness. You look without actually seeing. You're blind to the car. Okay. Oh. Okay, so visualization works because you can overcome these limits of our memory and our cognition. Right? I can go back and look at it again to get more information. Another reason that it works is it takes advantage of our perceptual system to show information. Okay? So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop up so on the next slide, there's going to be a bunch of letters. I want you to, when you think you know the number of these that are on those letters, just say them out loud. Okay, so everyone should say it within a couple of seconds or however many seconds. Okay, so y'all ready? All right, we need to loosen up. Okay. All right, here we go. That was not very confident. 4? No one else is it 4? 4. Okay, I'm hearing 4s. Okay, that took a while. Right, it took at least 5 seconds. All right, how about now? So I'm gonna do it again. When you count the number of V's, say it out loud again. Okay, ready? Here we go. Yeah. Right, so a very simple, we just change the color, right? We highlight some bit of information visually, and it reveals the insight. All right, let's do another one. So what we're going to do here is, loosen up your arms. We're going to show another image on the slide. When you find the red circle, point at it. Okay, don't poke, if there's someone in front of you, don't poke them. But when you see the red circle, go ahead and point at it. Y'all ready? Don't pull a muscle. All right. Here we go. That was really fast. Yeah. So that red circle just pops out at you. Right? It's a different color than the blue circles, so it's really obvious. In fact, it was so obvious you saw the circle before you even saw it, before you even knew that you saw it. This is a process called pre-attentive processing. You saw it before your brain even recognized that you saw it. Pretty cool. Let's do it again. So, I'm going to show another image. When you see the red circle in that image, go ahead and point again. Okay? We'll see if you can beat your last trial. All right, here we go. Ready? Some of y'all are slow. Well, I knew where it was, so I could point right away. But the rest of you, right, you had to kind of scan through the image and actually kind of actively look, where's that red circle? Right? Where is that red circle? I have a 2-year-old. He loves shapes and colors. He'd be like, it's right there. Right? But you've got to look for it. On the bottom image, there's different visual channels that are kind of conflicting with each other. And it messes up your perceptual system. Right? There's the shapes and the colors, right? They conflict in a way that you manually have to scan and try to find your target. And so it's a different type of perception. Okay. So, why do we analyze visualizations? We're going to do this a lot in this class. Right? We mentioned there's this huge space. All the different ways I could ever represent visualization. All the colors, all the different ways all the different ways I could put it on the page. All the ways I could combine 2 charts. Right? If we think systematically about how we visually encode the data and the ways that we can interact with it, we impose a structure on this space. We can analyze existing idioms, existing visualizations, as kind of a stepping stone to understanding this space, and maybe even designing our own visualizations, right? A new way to visualize the data. It also helps us understand, right, for my specific data and the task I want to perform, a lot of these visualizations are not very effective. They're not very, they're not the correct choices. Okay? Right? If we know what are good choices, right, we can reason about what are the trade-offs and the drawbacks of them. So we do have a textbook for this class that's fully online. And chapter 4 in that textbook, which we'll get to in a week or two, talks about this, what it calls a nested model. So 4 ways you can think about designing and validating visualizations. The first one is the domain. Who are the people that are going to use your visualization? Are they readers of the New York Times? Is it a 10-year-old? Is it a genomicist who's looking at DNA data? Right? Your target users have their own specific expertise, interest, attention, knowledge, background. That's going to influence what types of visualizations can work. If I show a cancer visualization to a 10-year-old, they're going to have no idea what the data I'm showing is. For a genomicist, that's probably a pretty good way to, that's the data that they're looking at. They're going to be familiar with those sorts of data. I can use that to my advantage to choose visualizations that fit those types of users. Data and task abstraction. So data is what we're actually showing. What is the data set? We can think, not just the data set itself, right? It's map data. It's states and counties. We can think more abstractly. It's geographic data, right? That sort of data. Instead of showing population, it's a quantitative, it's number data. It's not categorical data, right? So there's ways we can systematically think about the data that we want to show. And then why is the user looking at it? What's the task we want them to perform? Right, so the domain influences the data and the task. The domain, the data, and the task influence the idiom, the visualization techniques and interactions that are appropriate for showing that data, for supporting that task, for that user base. Right, so there's kind of levels. Each level influences the one below it. The lowest level is algorithm. Right? If we plot the data, maybe we need algorithms or a function that helps us plot the data efficiently. So very low level. Okay? So we'll talk more about this as we get into the class. I think this is a good slide because, right, the only thing here that's really programming related is algorithm. Right? I have to write some algorithm that computes the data and plots it on my computer. These higher levels deal with design or almost sociology, right? Who are my users? I have to understand what are their strengths and weaknesses. So this class is a lot more than just programming. It's also thinking about how do I match data and users. How do I actually take those types of considerations and choose ways to represent the data effectively. Okay, so we got about 10 minutes left. In that time, I just want to go over some very quick logistics. These are also on the Canvas site, or they will be. The site's about halfway live. The syllabus is up, but most of the other pages aren't yet. But just some important logistics to think about this semester. So I'm Dr. Ryan. Jinbin is one of my students. He's going to be the TA. Sai is our grader. So we're the folks that are teaching the class. So one note about this. So I'm showing Sai's picture here and his name, but you should never need to talk to him. Okay, pretend he doesn't exist. Any course communication, like if you want to talk about a grade or something, right? Like maybe a homework got misgraded, you're supposed to go through either myself or the TA. Okay, so if you send him a message and it's not something like, "You look nice today," right? If it's like arguing about class stuff, he's supposed to ignore you. All right, so he'll pretend you don't exist. Okay, but This is who class personnel are. Okay, class format. Lectures Tuesday, Thursday, and here. Lectures will cover analysis, design, theory about visualization. We'll also be doing coding demos to teach the programming that you'll need to know to do the homeworks and the course projects. Okay, so it's a language called D3. That's a JavaScript library for visualization. So if you've never done anything on the web before, you don't even know HTML, that is okay. All right, our first coding demo is on Thursday, and so it's kind of a very fast boot camp on HTML, JavaScript, and CSS, and it's real fast. But hopefully it's enough to kind of start getting you thinking about web programming that you can learn it along the way. Certainly an advantage if you've done it before, but if you haven't, it's not like you need to worry about failing the class. You can learn the amount of programming you need. And probably no one here has done D3, maybe one or two of you. The demos mostly cover D3. So we go really in-depth into D3. 2 lectures per week. Generally, Tuesday is kind of our lecture. Thursday is the coding demo. Okay, that's the general breakdown. I might change it later, but that's how we did it last semester. We do record all of our classes. Okay, and I post a link to that recorded lecture on the Canvas site. I try to do it the afternoon of the class, but within 24 hours is kind of my guideline. Now, this is not a sync class, so the department they're not letting us do I can't do like a Zoom class, okay? I've had some folks ask about that. They prefer in person, for lectures. As a general practice, this is what I've done in the past, so I'm just going to keep doing it. Ultimately, this is a textbook-based class, so we have this textbook that is accessible online. The lectures complement your textbook reading. Okay, so if you don't think you need to come to lecture, right, if you just want to read the textbook and you can get the information from that to do the quizzes that we'll do, that's your prerogative. Or if you just want to watch the recorded lectures. Now, at some point in this semester, we may do some in-class activities. We're not going to do them this week, but we may do some kind of activities that are graded on like a participation, no participation type of scheme. So if you miss class that day, right, if you don't attend, and if you don't have like a reasonable excuse, like I was sick or something, right, you can't get the points for those activities. So that's kind of the, and you can't participate in class, right? You can't, we all have fun pointing at the slide, pointing in like the NRV and stuff. Right, so that's the incentive to come to class. Okay, textbook. So this is a really good introductory textbook, talking about some of the concepts and principles that underlie visualization. It's accessible online. The syllabus tells you how to access it. And there will be like 1 chapter per week that you can read. Okay? You can also buy it off Amazon if you want to get it that way. But it's free. Okay, grading. So there's 3 main kind of buckets for grading. Programming assignments are worth 30% of the grade. There's 6 assignments, so each one is 5% of your overall grade. Quizzes and kind of all the other miscellaneous activities we'll do in class, that's worth 30%. So any surveys that we post, right, like a Canvas survey, those points will go into that bucket. Concept quizzes, they test the information we learned from lectures and from the textbook. Okay, so those are, and if we do any other, like, basically anything that's not a homework assignment or the project goes into that bucket right there. The course project is worth 40% of your overall grade. That's a lot. It's pretty important. I don't think it's an overly hard course project. I actually had some students say it was pretty easy last semester. Despite that, I'm not making it harder. But it is worth a lot. So there's lots of different kind of deliverables along the way. So forming a team, you're going to do a little project proposal. There's a work in progress milestone, right? A demo, final write-up. So lots of aspects to the course project. And then finally, we have an extra credit assignment. We don't curve in this class. Okay, so there's no class curve. There's no grade curves. The extra credit is what we use for a curve. So it's worth 1% extra on your final grade. Okay, so like let's say you have like an 88.5, right? You do the extra credit, your grade bumps up to 89.5. Well, in terms of like a curve, 88.5 may be a little too far away. But if you have like an 89.2, right, you do the extra credit, you get it, then you can bump up to an 8. So that's how the extra credit works. Okay, lots of text on here. So programming assignments, these will be web-based, mostly D3 exercises, usually 2, sometimes 3 weeks to complete them. The way that you'll do these, they'll be posted on Canvas with a link. That link goes to something called GitHub Classroom. Have y'all used GitHub Classroom before? Anyone? No? Okay. It's pretty cool. You go to that link, and it will create a private repository for you. So your own repository, no other students can access it, with the starter code for that assignment. Right, so only I and the TA and the grader can access it. So you get your starter code in a repository, download the repository locally, make your changes, submit it back up. That's how you submit your homework. Okay, you commit and push your code back to that repository. That's how you submit. So if you've never used GitHub before, that's the reason I do this, right? It's a nice exercise and a tool that you will almost certainly use once you graduate and, right, you're doing programming as part of your job, right? You're going to use some sort of version control. So I think it's some nice hands-on, just right, get used to doing that if you haven't done it very much. So the way to think about this is every time you do a commit and push from your local machine back to the main GitHub organization, that's like submitting your homework. So make lots of pushes, right? If something happens, right, you still can get partial credit. Has anyone not used GitHub before? Oh, okay, good. That's good too. Okay, grading. So the way it works, we just look at the last push prior to the deadline. If it's late, we do have a sliding scale for accepting late homework with a point deduction. Same thing with our concept quizzes. There'll be Canvas quizzes. You normally get a week to complete them. And if you submit it late, there's also a sliding penalty scale. So one of the things with concept quizzes, we let you submit those as many times as you want. Okay? So if you submit it and you get like a 50%, you can do it again, right? And we just take whatever the last grade is. Okay? So students have liked that in the past, so we don't have exams. Quizzes are open book. You know, there really shouldn't be a reason that you don't get 100 on a quiz. But we want you to learn the material. So I think they do a good job at that. All right, I'm going to go faster because I know we're at time. Project, we'll talk about it more in the semester. Yeah, it's the last 2 months. Other important stuff. Oh yeah, okay, last thing. So, Canvas site should be up within the next day or so. I had a Slack for this class and it disappeared. I don't know why. I sent a ticket to our IT department. But, would you all prefer Slack or Discord? Oh, okay. Okay. So has anyone not used Discord before? All right. So we're going to make a Discord then. So pretend that says Discord. So any course communication, you need to talk to me. Send me a Discord message once we get it up and running. No, don't email things like that. Office hours will be on Zoom. This stuff is on the syllabus, so you can read that. Okay. So, any questions? Feel free to start packing up. Okay. All right. We'll see you all Thursday. First coding demo.